Coming up, near-death experiences and the people who survived to share their stories. The Whitney Reynolds Show is supported by the Illinois chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, whose mission is to save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. Sharp Vision Modern LASIK. Believing is seeing. Children's Learning Place. Excellence in early childhood education since 1998. Evolve Her, a collaborative workspace for women. Hollis Plyman & Company, a Jacksonville CPA firm assisting individuals and businesses with financial success. And Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty. Luxury is an experience, not a price point. Special thanks to Goldfish Swim Schools of Chicagoland, The Cryo Bar, Chicago Andrea Creative, Deluxe Cleaning Services, Tutu School of Chicagoland, Cellular Intelligence, and Export Fitness. Bone-chilling accounts that almost never got told. Today we are sitting down with survivors who recount the experiences that almost took their lives and what they've learned with the time they've been left with. You're watching The Whitney Reynolds Show. Our first two guests met after a tragic accident. However, the person they claimed introduced them was not living. She had died in the car crash that brought them together. They join us now with more. Thank you both for coming on the show.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
So I'm going to direct the first question to you, Jeff. When you were in the car with your family, on that day, did you know something, like did you have a premonition that something was going to happen?
I had no premonition. I mean, in hindsight, there were interesting things. I watched my wife run up on the porch and hug and kiss her mother and father goodbye before we left to get in the car. I had a moment where I looked in the mirror, in the rear view mirror and saw my boys in the back and had this strange, profound connection. But I had no idea. It was a normal day, driving, hurrying, attempting to get back to work.
So you're in the car and the accident happens. Did you know right away that your wife and son had passed away?
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I mean, I blacked out for most of the accident. It was a horrible rollover. They said the car rolled at least 6, maybe 8 times. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old son crying in the back seat. And I thought, oh, thank goodness he's okay. I've got to get to him. That's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned. And that's when I also realized that no one else was crying. And that's when the reality hit that, oh no, I mean, half the family's gone.
And you, Dr. Jeff, were at the hospital. Tell us what that day was like for you, leading up to meeting actually you and your wife.
Yes, I was having a normal day in the emergency department, and you have to remember his crash was a couple hundred miles away. He was extricated from the vehicle, taken to a local hospital, and then flown to the trauma center where I was on duty. And when I entered the trauma room, I wasn't responsible for his care. Other doctors were providing his care. But I came into the trauma room and he was motionless and unconscious on the gurney and had an army of providers taking care of him. And above him in the air was his wife, Tamara, watching over his care. And she communicated with me at that time how grateful she was for what was being done for her husband.
So I just want to reiterate what you just said, because that is an amazing statement that you, as a doctor, had you ever seen an angel in the hospital room before?
Yes, I'd had experiences like that in the ER before, and I've had many since. As profound as it wasn't something that I hadn't experienced previously.
Now, Jeff, at this point, your wife was, by Dr. Jeff's account, with you.
Right.
Did you feel her presence whenever you were still in the car, knowing that she had passed away next to you?
Yes, and this is the incredible thing. I mean, in that absolute panic and horror of half the family's gone. I'm losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old in the back seat. Suddenly there was this light, I call it, but I felt like I was surrounded and comforted in the darkest moment I may ever know, and it's as if I was rising above the scene. I had no idea about the life flight or anybody coming. As I rose above the scene and what felt like this light comforted me, there was Tamara, my wife, with me, and she was communicating, you can't come. It's not your time. You can't be here. You've got to go back. And I had no idea of time or anything else in that, but as we made the choice and I decided to come back and said the most profound goodbye I'll ever say, that's when I found myself wandering through the hospital, eventually coming to my own body, when I thought, oh my gosh, that's me, but that's not me. I'm here having this profound experience, but that's when I knew it was time to get back in and get on with things.
I don't know about my viewers right now, but I have chill bumps just thinking about this experience over your own body, saying, okay, I got to go back.
Yeah.
Do you believe that that wasn't a dream, that you actually experienced potentially going on or coming back?
I know what I know. I mean, it was so tangible that even to this day, and it's been several years, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Now, did you see him when he made this decision to come back to life? Or was it still his wife looking over him?
I wasn't aware until a month later that he'd had this profound experience, because when I met him, he was unconscious. And I never expected to see him again. It was because a nurse in the department who also experienced Tamara's presence, also saw her when I did. She came to me a month later and said, we have to go tell Jeff what happened. And I said, no, we don't. We don't have to tell her, because I wasn't into sharing these things.
Yeah.
But she was persistent, and so a month after the accident, when Jeff was awake enough to talk, we went to his hospital room. He was still in the hospital. He'd had multiple surgeries by then. And she began to share what we'd experienced, and Jeff shared some of what he'd experienced, and that was the beginning of our 20-plus year friendship.
Now, I want to go back to what you were saying, because one of the things as we were doing research on this show is, here on Earth, this is all we know.
Right.
What are we maybe missing that you saw in that moment of, do I go on?
It's interesting because in the hospital, as I was coming to my own body, I was seeing the doctors, the nurses, the patients, the families of patients, and I saw everyone so much differently. I mean, I saw who they really were. I knew their love, their hate, their joy, their motivations. I knew them as if they were me. There was this absolute connected oneness, and it was all about love, unconditional love. Everyone I looked at, I loved them. Regardless of what they had done or hadn't done, there was this divine feeling of connection, love, and oneness that was unconditional. It was amazing.
Do you think, Dr. Jeff, that you have, having seen these angels, you call them angels? Is that
Sometimes, yes,
okay.
angels.
So having seen them, has that given you a new, almost like platform of being a doctor, a new mission as you're operating on people or saving lives, knowing that they could either go on or they have someone looking over them? Has it changed the way that you doctor?
It didn't really change my beliefs. I've always felt that we were beings that have existed before birth and will continue after death, and that we're here temporarily learning things. So it didn't change that, but it made me more aware, if you will. It's not uncommon, like Jeff described, for people to have these experiences, and I've had them myself, not a near-death experience, but others like what I've told you. It's very common for people to come back and say, that was the most real experience I've ever had. It was more real than anything I had in my body during my mortal existence.
That is incredible. So was your wife on set with us today? Was she here? Do you see her?
I don't see her, but I do feel her. And, life has gone on. I've remarried. We've adopted 2 boys. So we've got, I've got a wife and 3 boys, and we've created a life. But my wife who has passed, we don't even say deceased wife. I call her my angelic wife, because I feel like I have not only 1 but 2 guardians. My little boy who was a toddler that I lost in the accident, I feel his presence too, and yet when I feel him, it's not a toddler energy. It's this magnificent, courageous warrior guardian angel that seems to have my back no matter what.
That is beautiful. Well, thank you both for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Our next guest has become an expert with today's topic because he's escaped death numerous times and is here to explain how we can find heaven on earth. Robert, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Whitney.
So, heaven on earth, tell us what that means to you.
Well, it means that heaven isn't necessarily a location, as my 3 near-death experiences informed me. It's not a consistent place, but it is available in any life that you're in. It's a state of being.
A state of being. So you said you discovered this with your 3 near-death experiences. What was this moment of finding heaven with the being? Was it after all 3 had come and you're scratching your head of, why have I almost died 3 times?
I think that it actually came to me some years after my 3rd one in a way, because I had sort of suppressed the 3 near-death experiences until I reached a point in my life where what success I had was kind of meaningless and things sort of fell apart, and I found myself in this place of sort of complete humility. And all of these things kind of flooded into me over some years. I think in meditation, I kind of achieved a similar experience as I had had in the 3 near-death experiences, which are these aspects that I call heaven, of being enfolded in love and being experiencing this kind of transcendent unity, this sense of transcendent unity, and this kind of radiance or illuminative radiance and karmic instruction, and then this kind of renewal. And those are the aspects of heaven that I think are consistent in all near-death experiences.
And you found those in your 3. So let's go back and peel those layers back.
Yeah.
I want to understand how these led you, how these 3 factors are what you consider heaven on earth. Because if we can follow a model that potentially could lead us to more
Right.
peace, that's an interesting thought to me.
That's the idea, is that everybody's had a little piece of heaven, so how do you sustain that? How do you hold on to that? And that's what my book is about. But my first near-death experience was something I was not a spiritual person at all. I wasn't even thinking about it. And I was driving home from dropping my wife off at the airport, dusk in Los Angeles years ago. And there was an equipment failure, and I was distracted and glanced off an oddly parked car and went right into a telephone pole. And the next instant, I found myself at the top of the pole looking down at the scene. The windshield was broken out by my head, as it turned out. I could kind of see a person hanging out of the car, and I started to realize it was me.
Did you immediately get nervous, like what's happening, or were you peaceful?
No, I was immediately released from all such constraints of being human. I had no cares whatsoever. I felt enfolded in love. I felt a part of this kind of transcendent unity and part of a larger mind, like all my boundaries had kind of disappeared. So I felt great.
Wow.
But I looked down, I could look into people's yards. I saw lights going on. I saw people running out and hollering for an ambulance. I watched the ambulance pull up. I tried to talk to people, but nobody could hear me. I was kind of levitating. I was still me because I was seeing it, but I don't recall having a body at all.
Wow.
I do recall having kind of somebody behind me or a personage.
What did you chalk that up to then? Because you said it took a couple more times to really shake you to understand this heaven on earth concept. But what did you say, I probably was dreaming, or?
Well, I was an art director and illustrator in Los Angeles. I was very busy. And when I tried to tell people about that, they just looked at me, funnier than usual. And I didn't know that there was any kind of community, because this was in the 80s, and so the community was probably just forming based on.
And when you say
of a couple of
community,
people.
near-death experience community.
Yes, yeah. There's more and more all the time, because there is definitively, there are more survivors of near-death experiences. Some studies demonstrate as many as maybe 15 or 20% of cardiac arrest victims, for example, have near-death experiences.
So how do we find heaven on earth? What would you say the trick of this would be?
Well, how do you imagine people to be in heaven, or how do you imagine heaven to be? It's this place of this kind of lightness and a sense of freedom. everybody is kind, everybody is honest, everybody is humble, everyone is forgiving and compassionate, and any angel will drop their heart to help you with at any time. So people are service oriented. So if you do those things, if you follow those principles in your life, you're basically creating a kind of a heaven around you that then the world begins to reflect. Other people feel it, sense it, reflect it back to you, and it expands and grows. And so that's a big part of it, being what you think heaven is in your life.
Oh, so kind of identifying what you think that would be and doing that.
Right.
Such
yes.
great advice.
Yeah.
And like you said, the people don't have to have these out of body near-death experiences.
How to get to heaven without really dying. That's the
Right.
important part.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's now time for our viewer's voice, and this week's question is, what close calls have you had in your own life?
So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and during my childhood, my family wasn't very financially stable. And despite Puerto Rico being a great place to live in, it just wasn't really providing us with a lot of opportunities at the time. And it wasn't until I was around 10 years old that my mom decided to take me and my sister to Texas to pursue a better life. And you don't realize this as a kid, but I quickly learned how hard of a decision it was for her to make and how much it actually did change my life completely. I'm so lucky to have had multiple educational opportunities and career opportunities that I'm not sure I would have had if I was still living in Puerto Rico. So I will forever be grateful for that.
Get social with us and make your voice heard. Add your video on WhitneyReynolds.com or on social.
They say live each day to the fullest. And our next guest would add, because it could be your last. Nancy Ryan joins us now with her thoughts on living with purpose after a near-death experience. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you for having me on, Whitney. I really appreciate being here.
And I am glad you are here because there was a time in your life where you thought it might have been your last day. Tell us about your story.
Yeah, actually, it was a little bit over 5 years ago. I thought I was done for. I rode my bike on a path that I normally take into a roundabout, a traffic circle, in my little hometown of Lafayette, which is just outside of Boulder. And as I was coming in, a woman who was driving a very large SUV came in on another road from my right, and it looked at first like she was going to stop. And at the very last second, instead of stopping, she actually accelerated a little bit into the roundabout without really seeing what was happening. She didn't see me right there, and I was right there. And so she hit me right on my right side on my bicycle, and I ended up on the roof of her vehicle, the hood where the engine compartment is, looking in at her. And I could see her hands were on the steering wheel, and she was texting. And she didn't see me. I mean, we were about this close.
Oh.
And she didn't see me on the hood of her vehicle. And at that point, I thought, this is it.
Right.
I don't know what to do. I was really thinking that was the last moment of my life right then.
I'm in shock right now because usually when you hear these stories, there's an accident. It's like, okay, but you're looking in and you're seeing, you're still going.
I'm like, can't you? I'm thinking to myself, can't you see me? I'm right here looking at you. I couldn't lift my hands up. Otherwise, I would have been doing this in the windshield. But yeah, I was thinking, why aren't you stopping?
And so she was texting.
And she was texting.
Did she not feel that she had hit something?
I think she was so distracted with her phone that she didn't pay attention to that.
Oh my goodness. So then what happened? She kept going.
She kept driving, and I was almost like this, trying to find something to grab onto. And I just couldn't grab onto anything on the hood of her car. So I slipped down and I went over the front of her vehicle as she's still driving and hit the pavement. I could feel my shoulder hit and my hip hit. And that's when I knew things were really bad at that point. I really didn't think that I was going to make it. What really happened is that she started to roll, like if this is me, she rolled over me just a little bit and I got something on me. I don't know if it was my backpack strap. I had a backpack on. If that got caught on her vehicle or what, but something got caught on the underside of her vehicle. And so she was dragging me then underneath. And all I can think of is, I guess I'm not going to see my daughter grow up. That was the first thing out of that I could think of, is I'm not going to see my daughter grow up. I'm not going to see my sisters again.
And when those thoughts are going through your mind, how did you stay with, I got to stay here? Like, what was it? Was it your daughter's face that was in your mind, or was it just your tenacity in that moment to say, okay, I'm along literally for the ride here?
It was, I don't know if I can pinpoint what it was. I think it was my daughter and my sisters, because we're so close, my sisters and I. And I definitely wanted to be there for my daughter. So those three lovely people were right there in my mind. But also during the time where I hit the pavement, something really odd happened. And I think this is really what kept me together and going, is there was a sense of being outside of my body at the same time as that I was in it. And that part of me that was outside watching everything happen was a completely different person in some ways. It was that part of me was very serene and kept telling me under the vehicle, don't worry, hang in there, everything's going to be okay.
Have you tapped into that Nancy again after the accident?
After everything yes, I have. And that's really the me that's sitting here today. That part of me that was that higher consciousness, that higher sense of myself, that, if you want to call it better or whatever, that's really more of who I am now than the person I was before.
How do you think we could all find that person within us without going through the tragedy that you did?
It's, it can be an instantaneous thing like it is for some people, and for others it can take time. What I like to do when I teach people how to do this for themselves is encourage, for a time, a lot of self-reflection. Getting outside sometimes is really awesome to kind of get in touch with the you that you really are. And spending
and you think
time.
We all have that person.
Oh, yes. I know it. I can see it in everybody. Now that I've been there myself, I know what that looks like. But we all have that, and it takes, to really tap into that, it takes really a lot of letting go too, a lot of surrender, a lot of letting go of being afraid. It's almost as if though at least for me, I was almost afraid to bring that out beforehand because it seemed really big. And I think Marianne Williamson a long time ago had this beautiful quote to the effect of, we're almost afraid to be the grand person that we really are. And that's where I was. And it's letting go, it's surrendering into what that is for us.
And find your inner self.
And find who you really are and embrace it.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's crazy to think that your near-death experience is what you're saying now has freed you to live.
It has, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Today's guests know they are here for a reason. But truly, aren't we all? Today's show is a reminder how each day is truly a gift. For more information on today's show, visit WhitneyReynolds.com. Go beyond the interview with Whitney Reynolds' 52-Week Guide of Inspiration. The book goes deeper with the topics you see on The Whitney Reynolds Show. To get your copy for $12.95 plus shipping and handling, go to whitneyreynolds.com/store and use code PBS. The Whitney Reynolds Show is supported by the Illinois chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, whose mission is to save lives and bring hope to those affected by suicide. Sharp Vision Modern LASIK. Believing is seeing. Children's Learning Place. Excellence in early childhood education since 1998. Evolve Her. A collaborative workspace for women. Hollis Plyman & Company, a Jacksonville CPA firm assisting individuals and businesses with financial success. And Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty. Luxury is an experience, not a price point. Special thanks to Goldfish Swim Schools of Chicagoland, The Cryo Bar, Chicago Andrea Creative, Deluxe Cleaning Services, Tutu School of Chicagoland, Cellular Intelligence, and Export Fitness.